Welcome back to the Voices of Women Summit, where in honor of International Women's Day 2023, we are raising the voices of hundreds of women so that their messages can be heard. Your host for this session is Kay Miller. Kay is your health detective with a passion for helping moms overcome depression and building generational health. She has another amazing guest coming right up. Take it away, Kay.
Hello. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you've been enjoying the talk so far today. We have another great talk coming up with Miss Lizbeth Meredith. Thank you so much for joining us, Lizbeth. How are you today?
Oh, I'm great. How are you doing, Kay?
I'm great. I'm so excited, loving this International Women's Day, being here celebrating with all of you. And I cannot wait to get into your talk that you're going to share with us. Your talk title is The Tale of Two Mothers: How Access to Supportive Services Helped Me Prevail Over Domestic Abuse and Poverty. And this is such a wonderful and touching topic that I think will be vitally supportive to so many women. Would you like to share a little bit about yourself, Lizbeth, and how you got around to sharing this information with the rest of us?
I absolutely would. And thanks so much for having me and for doing your part to, elevate the voices of women today. It's just awesome. So I am an award-winning author whose story became a Lifetime TV movie. But before that, I was a woman who worked in non-traditional work as a probation officer, child abuse investigator, and domestic abuse survivor. I worked with domestic abuse survivors because I was someone who truly believed as a small child that the family I grew up in that was punctuated by, family abuse and divorces, domestic violence, not international, but parental kidnapping, a lot of alienation. I was sure that my good intentions to do different, when I got older, I would just sort of manifest a better life in the future, that would be enough. And I ignored my history, and I certainly ignored women's history, and just thought, man, I am going to kill it when I get older. I'm going to have a future with a family that stays intact and is fabulous. And with no sort of doing an emotional sort of autopsy of my past, I didn't do any looking back. I simply plunged forward and repeated so much worse the mistakes that were made in my childhood. So I went from being this sort of self-righteous, judgmental little kid to being a very young parent with two little girls at a battered women's shelter, applying for public assistance benefits and getting a protective order against their father. And fast forward 4 years after that, being a mother of children who were internationally kidnapped. So I learned pretty quickly that good intentions simply weren't enough. And I wanted so badly to be different than the role model, and not to be disrespectful, but that my mother had presented. I didn't realize that what it took to get over so many hurdles was community and, frankly, services that weren't available to her. So that's sort of my shorter story is, I was very fortunate in some ways to be going through tough times at a time in our history when I had access to a domestic abuse shelter, a Pell Grant to go to college, to get an education, because our grandmothers and great-grandmothers weren't even allowed an education. And, I was fortunate to have birth control. I didn't have 13 children or 15 children or whatever. I was able to forge a different path because of the sacrifices made by our foremothers.
Wow, yes, that's really the differences just by going a few generations, of
Right.
the services and the access that we actually do have to the support that they didn't, going through their struggles and their trials, and understanding how easy it is to repeat those if you're not aware of what you have available and how to use it. So awesome. I cannot wait to dive into this talk then and hear more about this tale of two mothers. So Lizbeth, please take it away.
Well, it was one thing that I went to the shelter and I got a protective order, and I decided I was going to leave abuse behind and break the intergenerational pattern of trauma in my history that was generations deep. And for a lot of us as women, we actually, if we did the work to find out our family's history, we do see similar patterns. Sometimes we have inherited trauma that happens. I could look at my life as a young woman and say, gosh, I don't know that I feel like I'm worth more. That was when I was at my worst, but I know that my daughters are worth more. And so fortunately, I started to understand, oh, no, no one deserves to be hurt, to be abused. And we all have an amazing, there's a sense of there's a purpose for all of us. And it's just a matter of finding what that is. So going from the shelter to, leaving, getting a divorce, I kind of had to embrace poverty and all of the consequences that came with forging a different path. When I was young, my mother really discouraged the idea of using any kind of public assistance. And I understand that now. In her generation, what she needed to do was, as a Southern woman with no money or education or opportunities for such that she could see, she had to marry and sometimes remarry and had children to hold on to her partner. I mean, that was kind of kids and marriage were her currency to survive. And the unfortunate thing is not all women like to have marriages. Not all women like to be married. Certainly not all women like to have children. And she later kind of got rid of all of us. She did not fit into that very slimly defined role. And so as a young woman, what I needed to do was understand I was fortunate. My circumstances were different. I lived in a different time. So leaving abuse was one circumstance. Leaving abuse forever and forging a new path, that took a few ingredients that I think I didn't realize at the time. It wasn't just good intentions. Certainly setting our intention, first thing we do, I mean, if anyone agrees, give you a thumbs up, because if you feel like you can set your intention, you know what you want, that's a powerful first step to have a vision for ourselves. But next thing we need to do, find out who can help. Because I think often in women's history, and certainly in the feminist movement, there's a sort of misnomer that we have to be self-made women, super independent. And I would say, not really. I think we always, to achieve great things and to achieve a satisfying life, we do it together. And so find out who is it who can help support you, whether it's supportive services. Maybe a person is needing legal aid. Maybe they are needing an education. Maybe it's a new entrepreneur trying to figure out who do I admire that I can emulate and who might mentor me, maybe not formally, but that I can at least look at, reverse engineering her path to success. Doing it alone rarely produces long-term benefits that are sustainable, but being in a supportive community, that is everything. And I learned quickly early on that yes, I did need public assistance for a period of time and a Pell Grant. And it was super embarrassing to ask for support and to be that needy person and to live in Section 8 housing. On the other hand, I learned that all of the places that supported me, and this is true in business as well, if you get a grant, if you're a part of an entrepreneur group, the people and places that support you, they want to elevate you. They want to brag about your success later. So it's an important skill to learn to ask for help and to learn to double back and give it later. That was a really big deal. So finding out who can help and the importance of building community and keeping it, not just asking for help when we need it, but really showing up for others later and having that vision, as we had that first vision for ourselves, that good intention, that goal of what would our lives look like if we weren't in this circumstance, if we had what we wanted, For me, it was a safe home for my children where there wasn't violence, the opportunity for education and no early pregnancies, like was generations deep in my family. So having that intention and that vision was important, but then moving forward, how to build and sustain community. Because when we get that, when we learn those lessons, our setbacks, our traumas, they can refine us, not define us. And that was really important to figure out, like, wait a minute, these horrible things I've gone through, they don't just have to be circumstances I look away from and say, oof, thank goodness I'm not there anymore. They can turn into our superpowers if implemented correctly to help, have a vision. I didn't understand when I was in my mid-20s that I could someday travel the globe, albeit on a cheap budget, because I'd stayed in a shelter, because I'd learned to be strong and to get along with people and to adapt to different circumstances. I didn't understand that being tenacious meant I could have a book that was once an Amazon bestseller that turned into a TV movie. And I learned that from the struggle and wouldn't have gotten there without that struggle and with good community.
Oh, yes, definitely. I'm loving this, what you're sharing with us, especially about being able to use your story to refine you, not to define you.
Right.
And just digging into the surfaces and the support systems that are out there for us. So they're there for a reason. And
Exactly.
they definitely can help us to get to where we're trying to go. So
They
I'm glad that
absolutely can.
yeah, I'm glad
Thank
you
you,
were able
Kay.
to dig into that and use that and access it.
It's so fun when you realize that, oh my goodness, it's not just me being at the bottom of my, at the feeling rock bottom and asking for help, and that feels so bad. But no, it's an opportunity to connect with so many other people who've either walked in my shoes or who later walk in my shoes. And that sense of a safety net and of purpose. When I went to work with other domestic abuse survivors, and I made a powerfully small salary at the time, but it didn't matter because that sense of like, oh my gosh, this is so great to help other people who have been there or who are going through what I went through, and to be able to say, here's a couple of things that work for me, or here's what I learned about the system, and to watch that woman become stronger and more confident and have that assurance of mission, that was phenomenal. That was a currency like no other. And it's something that I absolutely adore even today in the work that I do.
Yes, yes, it's definitely an experience that's hard to describe, right? When you're connecting with others that have had a shared experience in some manner, and you're able to see them rise and go through the steps and go through the process as well and connect with you, and that helps to propel them further. It's very beautiful. It definitely is. And I can totally connect with and remember also through my story of how, you may not be willing to do something for yourself, but you may look at your children and say, I need to make this change for them. And
Exactly.
that's definitely a crucial point when you're able to go ahead and finally make those changes. Did you have
It
some more to share
is.
with us about how you actually found and got into the services that were available for you?
And I was so fortunate. And it wasn't until later when I started writing my book and looking at my mother's life, even though I was a much older woman by that point when it was coming time for publication, it really helped unspool some of the hurt that I had and helped me understand, oh, okay, so this wasn't simply about me being exceptionally clever and her not caring. There weren't the opportunities that our grandmothers and some of our mothers and great grandmothers, they didn't have opportunities. Domestic abuse has not been illegal in the United States for all that long. And there are countries today in which it's still not against the law. And so there weren't supportive services such as shelter, such as things like grants to help women learn to be able to support their own families. I never remarried. I was in my mid-20s when I left abuse. And I'm not suggesting any of this was easy or fun. A lot of the time was not. But I was fortunate that nowadays I could be the sole supporter of two girls not getting child support. And eventually they grew up and got their own educations. And it meant the world to me. And that was not because of something special I did. It was built on the sacrifices of many women in the past.
Yes, definitely. Definitely. That's so key though. I don't think a lot of us realize or think about what it was like, 50 years
Right.
ago, 60 years ago,
Exactly.
if you weren't here or if you were
Right.
just getting on the planet even, it's not in our radar to even conceptualize, well, they didn't have this, and that. And that's why my mom made this decision or my dad made that decision. So it's really
Right.
key that you're highlighting that. I think that's really important. And you said that all of this experience that you went through, you put it into a book and then that culminated into a movie. Would you like to tell us more about that
Sure, that
process
was
that
so
went?
exciting. So exciting. So I wrote a memoir and it took me forever. When I started writing my memoir, because my kids had been kidnapped and taken out of country for 2 years. So by the time we reunited, they didn't even speak my language. And that was all to get back at me for leaving abuse. And so when I first started writing the book, I was a spiteful young woman in my early 30s who really wanted to write a book to just get back at everyone who treated me wrong. And thankfully, I was such a bad writer that it took a long time taking classes and hiring writing coaches and being in critique book groups until finally I was able to publish my memoir. But I published it independently with a small publisher. And a couple of years later, I learned to promote. It's funny because a lot of the struggle of being a welfare mom to getting a degree and being independent, it took those same skill sets really to market my book. You got to get scrappy and you've got to have that sense of mission and believe that your story is worth hearing. And so I promoted it. And 2 years later, I was contacted by a production company in Canada. And eventually it took a year for us to have discussions with my publisher and me, but eventually they signed for movie rights. And just a year ago, almost exactly to today, it became a TV movie called Stolen by Their Father. And I'm so excited. It has a great impact. I hear every week from women and men who were impacted by the things that not only happened, but how many amazing humans joined my effort to reunite me with my kidnapped daughters. And so that was really, I probably in my obituary one day, that's going to be something that I'm very proud of, that having a book that, it could have nobody read if I weren't really determined. And then it became a TV movie and they did a beautiful job honoring the efforts of so many people, not just me.
Wow, that's really beautiful. And I understand that you have a free gift for all of our listeners and everyone that's joining us today that would like to know more about your story, correct?
Yes, absolutely. We have the link already for the documentary that's sort of a behind the scenes to making the movie. It has interviews with my daughters as well as myself, telling our real story. Because whenever someone makes a movie based on your life, they have to shorten so much of it. They did a great job. I have no complaints. But there were other stories to be heard, and it gave my daughters, young women now, a voice. So we have that there.
Very
And thank
nice.
you.
Yes, and if anyone in the audience that's joined us today has any questions, I'm sorry, I forgot to ask, please feel free. While we have a few minutes left with Lizbeth, go ahead and drop any questions you may have in the chat box, and we'll definitely make sure she gets a chance to answer them before we leave. Click on that link that the tech host just shared there with you so that you can get to her free gift and be able to watch that documentary. I'm sure it will be so enlightening and useful for you. So thank you so much for sharing that with us, Lizbeth.
Thank you.
I'm just in awe of your journey, your struggle, your growth, your story of even understanding yourself and realizing and recognizing where you were at in the process of being, I'm just spiteful and angry at this point. And, or that you were just, going to go ahead and just go through it gung-ho on your own and get it done, but you realize, it kind of needs some support with this. So I
Right.
kind of need some help.
I needed to grow up is what I needed to do too. Process the wound and then see it for what it was, I'm so
don't
glad
we
I
all?
didn't get made. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for the conversation today, Kay. I really appreciate it.
Yes, I appreciate you joining in and sharing this story with us, and letting people know that it's okay. It's okay to need help. It's okay to reach out and get those services. If you need them, use them. That's what they're there for when you need them, to give you that hand and pull you up so you can run off and create great books and stories and movies and wonderful things for all the rest of us. You can't do all those things while you're battling with yourself and with your struggles and
Right.
just trying to survive. So we want everyone thriving, right? So
We
that's
do
good.
want everyone thriving, and we thrive together. Even for those of us who say, I'm an introvert, or I'm too proud to do that, or whatever, even in business, even in life, if there are times I'm super struggling and I don't reach out for support, those are the times that struggle goes on and on and on. We need each other and we need help at times, and our strength is being vulnerable.
Definitely is. And ladies and gentlemen that are all watching us and joining us today, I just want to let you know that we have many more great talks today. If you're going to hang around, our next talk is going to be Mary Louise Rose. She's sharing how to bust healthy habit myths. And I cannot see the rest of her talk title, unfortunately, for some reason. Oh, there it goes. And making your journey easier. So that's going to be the next talk that's coming up. If you want to stick around and listen to her, please do find that on your schedule links. Make sure you guys are signed up for VIP so you can get those VIP gifts. And Lizbeth, before we go, do you have any last final thoughts? What is the one thing you would love people to leave this talk with if they only remember one thing from what you had to say?
But definitely leaning into getting support really can be the game changer that lets our struggles refine us instead of define us. And it is possible that someday we can look back then on our struggle and figure out which strengths we want to keep and implement to become our superpowers and to take us to fun places and to a less chaotic time, and to write a story that, even if we're not writers, but to in some way finish the story that we're really proud that our relatives will one day share.
Awesome. And we've got another video glitch, but that's great. We have loved this talk. Thank you so much, Elizabeth, for joining us, and wish you all the best. This is Kay. Talk to you later.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for joining us for another amazing session of the Voices of Women Summit, where our mission is to raise the voices of hundreds of women so their messages can be heard. For recordings of all sessions, plus an amazing VIP gift bundle, upgrade to VIP now. If you have any questions or problems during the summit, email our support team at support@voicesofwomensummit.com. Stay tuned. We have another fantastic speaker coming right up.